In this video, I'm going to show you how to make this adorable Cocomelon cake. Hi, it's Karolyn. I'm a professional cake decorator, and on this channel I share my tips and tricks and ways that I bake and decorate cakes to help you along your journey. So if you'd like to join me, hit the subscribe button and the bell so you can get notified whenever I release a new video. This one is pretty simple. It's on the simpler side, so beginners would be able to do something like this. I use edible images to print out the characters. Now in this video, I'm not going to show you an in-depth tutorial on how to use an edible image printer and how to print them out. I do have a video on how I do that, and I will link that below. So if you want to learn more about how to do that, you can see it in that video. So I get all of my edible image supplies from Icing Images. I love them. I've been shopping there for years. They're super quick. Delivery, is it shipping? They have super quick shipping, and I just love their products. The paper, everything is just high quality, and I am now affiliated with them. I'm so excited. I have a link in the description below, so if you'd like to check out their site, you can go ahead and click that link. And just a reminder, if you want to check out my birthday cake design blueprint, it is in the description below. So let's get into the video. All right, to start, we're going to make the ganache drip. I'm just going to do a quick overview, and if you want to see a more in-depth tutorial on the ganache drip, then I will link that video below. So I have a scale here, and I like to use a glass bowl because it helps melt the chocolate. So I'm going to put the glass bowl on here. This scale I got on Amazon, I can link it below. And I just turn it on and set it to 0. And then I have candy melts. I get these at Michael's craft store. These are such a good brand. They melt so much better than the other brands that I've used, but you can use any candy melt. So I'm going to use white and a little bit of red to get to a pink color. I don't have candy coloring. You could also, if you have oil-based coloring, you could add color yourself. So I'm going to start with white, and I want to change this to ounces. So on unit, I can keep hitting unit until it goes to ounces. And it starts at 0 ounces. And I'm going to add about 5.8 ounces. There's 5.7 ounces. And then I have red candy melts. And I'm just going to add like 3 little discs. Okay, I added 4, and now it's up to 6 ounces. And I'm going to do this off camera, but I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put it in the microwave for 20 seconds, and then I like to use a spatula because I can scrape down the sides, stir it, put it back in for 20 seconds, stir it, put it back in for 20 seconds, stir it. That way it slowly melts the chocolate. Okay, and here's what it looks like. The bowl is hot, so I have to use this little holder. Now, when you're stirring it, you don't want to whip it. You want to stir it gently so you don't whip air bubbles into it. And now I'm going to turn this on so it sets to 0. I have room temperature water in here, and I'm going to pour in a 1/2 ounce and stir that. Now it's going to start to seize up, and that's okay because we're going to add a little more water and it won't be all chunky and disgusting. So now again, as I'm stirring this, you don't want to whip. Just stir it gently. Okay, it's still a little too thick. So what I want to do, put it back on the scale, set it to 0, and then I'm going to add like another 0.2 or 0.3 ounces of water. That's good. And stir it again. So I want to get it to a really thin consistency and then let it cool down, and then I will pour it on the cake. So the reason you can add water to this chocolate is because it's not really chocolate. White chocolate isn't chocolate, so it's not going to totally mess it up. And I want to make it a little thinner. So again, setting it to 0 and adding another like 0.2 ounces. And that's a good thin consistency. Now I want to let this sit for about, I don't know, 2 to 3 minutes, and it's going to start to cool down a little bit. Right now it's too thin to put on the cake. So this is where it gets a little tricky. You have to just find that happy medium. Now my cake is going to be out of the refrigerator, so the chill in the icing is going to help set this. So it just has to be a little cooler than it is right now. I'm sorry I have all my protein powder and everything in the background, and I used to just clear everything out, but it takes too long. So it's my kitchen. Anyway, I have a NutriBullet, and I like to use the cups for the NutriBullet for this. This is an 18-inch piping bag. I'm going to fold it over on the top. Just make sure it's open and stick it in here. I'm not cutting the tip off yet. And also I'm going to want like just a little clip or something to hold the bag shut. I always like to wipe the cake board before I put the ganache on there, just to make sure the cake board is clean. Sometimes there's icing on there from me icing the cake. All right, so this is just out of the refrigerator. The icing is hard and it's cold, so it's going to help the ganache set. I want to pour the ganache in the bag. So it's been sitting out for about 3 minutes right now. And then I just want to close the bag. I usually just fold the 2 corners in and then fold it down twice and clip it. So now I want to hold the tip up so it doesn't all just leak out. And I'm going to cut the tip off, not too much, just a little bit of that tip. I have a paper towel here because it can get a little messy. Let's hold this against the side of the cake. And I'm starting to squeeze, 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 then stop. Then I'm going to move over and squeeze a little more. So you just have to find your flow basically, right? So I'll do a couple short ones and then I'll do longer ones. And you can skip some space and then do a couple close together, right? Want to make sure that you're holding it straight so the drips drip straight and don't all flow together. See, I'm kind of moving over and then drip, move over and then drip. And the chill in the icing is going to help set the ganache. If you want it to drip longer, just squeeze and hold and then move over. Now this is a 6-inch cake. That's why I use 6 ounces of the candy melts. I just kind of base it on the size of the cake. So for a 6-inch cake, I use 6 ounces. For an 8-inch cake, I would use 8 ounces. And now I'm going to fill it in. So squeezing, and I'm just turning the turntable with my bottom hand. Now what I want to do is smooth out this little line here. So I have a spatula, and I'm going to dip it in some hot water. So I just have this here, keeping a little bit of water on the end of the spatula and just trying to smooth this line. So I'm going to keep wiping the spatula off on the paper towel after I smooth it out. This is actually going to be easier with like a palette knife, a smaller palette knife. So before it's set, take the chocolate, wipe it off on a paper towel, and then repeat the process. So before it sets, you could still manipulate it and move it into place. And look how pretty that is. So I'm going to set this back in the refrigerator for a couple hours because I want the ganache to solidify, and that way I won't mess it up when I'm decorating. All right, now we're going to make the rainbow. I already have some fondant that is colored, the colors that I want to use, but I got out pink, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. And I'm going to start from purple and go up to pink. So I popped these 3 colors in the microwave just to get them to be a little soft. I always mix some Tylose powder in with my fondant. The Tylose powder is going to help the fondant set up a little harder, and it's going to hold its shape a lot better. This fondant already has Tylose powder mixed into it, so I don't want to do that. But what you would want to do is just sprinkle a little bit. A little bit goes a long way, and then knead it together. And you might want to let it sit for a little bit till it starts to hold its shape. It'll become really smooth when it's ready to be worked with. I measured my cake, and I'm going to put a split screen or a picture up here so you could see that the rainbow on the cake, I don't want it to be wider than 5 inches and taller than 3.5 inches. Okay, so it's important to know so you don't have the wrong size rainbow for your cake. And I've just found you can use a clay gun for this, but I find that the clay gun can be a little sloppy. So what I'm going to do is just get a piece and just start rolling it into a log. The trickiest part about this is you have to make sure that it's an even, like all the colors are basically the same, not like diameter or whatever, you know, the same thickness. So when I'm rolling out stuff like this, don't press really hard because you're going to put your finger impressions into it. So I'm just rolling lightly and I'm moving my hands out. Roll lightly and move out. And I'm really just using the fingertips until you get it to a nice thickness. So it's about that thick. That's perfect. Just keep it long like this, and I'm going to set it aside and do the same thing for the other colors. All right, now I have all the colors rolled out, and I want to get them to stick together a little bit. So this part is a little tricky. Why is that my favorite word? Tricky. Everything's tricky. I'm like freaking Run DMC. But anyway, all right, so what I like to do, I have a tiny paintbrush and a little bit of water. And you do not need a lot of water. You want to get water in between so these can stick together. However, you don't want it seeping out of the front, right? So as I'm getting it wet, I'm just pushing it together, right? Now I have my ruler here. I'm going to make sure it's 5 inches wide and no more than 3.5 inches tall. So I'm going to start to bend it into a rainbow shape. You can grab a glass or something round so you can wrap it around there. Not necessary, but now I want to take my ruler and see this is 6 inches wide, so I need it to come a little bit closer together. So I want to use a little bit smaller of a circle to wrap this around. Perfect. 5 inches wide, so, and 3.5 inches tall. So from here down to here, this is where I want to cut. Doesn't have to be exact. And here's the rainbow. So what I'm going to do, I want to transfer it to a cutting board. I actually want to sprinkle down some cornstarch just so it doesn't stick. And place it back down. Good, and now I'm going to leave it here to dry. The bottom is going to go in buttercream clouds, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but still making sure it's 5 inches wide, 3.5 inches tall. Perfect. Now I'm going to set this aside and I will cut out the edible images. All right, now I printed out all the characters that I want in the size that I want. I will link this entire picture in the description below so you can click it and get to it. And I have a video on explaining how I use edible images in depth, showing you how I print them out and everything. And I can link that below as well in case you don't know how to do that. So I peel it off the acetate paper and I'm just going to cut all of these out. I like to do a rough cut first and just separate all the pieces. So now I find it easier to cut a little white border around everything. That way you don't have to be exact in your cuts. In the meantime, I rolled out white fondant, mixed it with a little Tylose. I rolled it out super thin, all right? And I'm letting that sit while I cut these out, so then it'll be ready for me to glue them on there. Now for the stars, I'm going to cut exactly on the line, and then I'm going to cut the white border out of the fondant. I will show you what I mean. And also for this pig, so you can see the pig has a gray background, and I don't want that. If I cut a little border around like I did with this, you would see gray on the outside. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to cut the whole outline of the pig, and then I'll cut a white border in the fondant. All right, now I want to get some piping gel on the back so I can adhere these to the fondant. I just have regular piping gel and a paintbrush, and I like to do this on a paper towel. So get some piping gel on the paintbrush, flip it over, and I want to make sure that I get all the way to the edges. So I am going to brush the piping gel off of the image and onto the paper towel. Just make sure you do not move the image. I'm going to hold it down with my paintbrush, lift my fingers up, and then hold it down on the other side. You don't want it to move because now there's piping gel on the paper towel, and you don't want the image to touch the piping gel. Lift it up and then place it down, and make sure you push the whole way down all the way on the edges because you really want the edges to be sealed to the fondant. You don't want to use too much piping gel because you don't want it to seep out. So now I want to remember where there's piping gel here, right? So I'm going to place all of these images down so I know where I can paint. Because I already have piping gel here. I don't want to put another image down there because I could essentially put that on the piping gel and it'll ruin the image. So doing that for all the pieces. Now there's piping gel on this paper towel. I'm going to fold it in half. And now I could put the other images upside down on here. And now I want to cut these out. I have a wet paper towel and an X-Acto knife that I can keep wiping the X-Acto knife on the paper towel because the fondant's going to start to stick to it. So with the images that already have the white border cut into it, I'm just going to cut exactly along the edge. And whenever I cut anything out of fondant, you're going to have just some jagged edges. So just take your finger and run it along the sides just to smooth out all the cuts. And then I'm going to put it face up on a cutting board. Now for the images that don't have a border, like these stars and the pig, what you want to do, get close and then cut a border, an even border the whole way around. So it basically looks the same as if you cut it out of the paper. So you have the border cut into the paper and the border cut into the fondant. Either way, it has a white border and it'll all look the same. All right, now I have them all cut out and I want to just dry these flat. So I'm just going to leave these out at room temperature. Don't put it in the fridge, just let the air hit it and it'll dry them hard so they can stand up and hold their shape. All right, now I want to cut out the name. So what I did, I'm putting the name on the rainbow and I took my ruler and measured. They can be a little bigger than 1 inch high, so it'll fit on there. Luckily, this name is only 4 letters. If you have someone with a 9-letter name, you may have to do something different. So about 20 minutes ago, I rolled out white fondant pretty thin. This is mixed with Tylose powder and it has been sitting, so it has time to stiffen up a little bit. And we're just going to do my trace, cut, and smooth method. So put this down on top. Make sure it's completely covered. This is Grow Bold font, by the way. I'll put that in the description below so you can see. But make sure it's completely down and then just trace the outside with a Dresden tool or some kind of tool where you can press and transfer the line onto the fondant. I do have videos showing how I make names like this, which I go into much deeper detail, and I will link that below. And these letters will fit on here like that. I'm just going to let them dry flat on the board before I put them on the rainbow. So just setting this aside. And now we'll move on to the number. She's turning 1. So I'm going to use this patchwork cutter. I can find this and link this below. If you don't have a patchwork cutter or you don't feel like buying this, you can just print out the number 1 on Microsoft Word or your computer or whatever. Just measure the cake and measure the size that you want it to be. So usually my numbers are about 4 inches high, and this is 4 inches high. It's up to you. So what I'm going to do, if you had a number 1 that you wanted to print out, you're going to do the same thing that we did with the name. Lay it down and trace the number 1 and then cut it out. But this is just a little easier. These patchwork numbers come, I have 0 to 9. And then just place it down. I didn't tell you, I rolled this fondant out really thin. I also have a video on how I make the number toppers, which I can link below. That goes into deeper detail as well. But this is rolled out with Tylose, and it has been sitting out for like, I don't know, 20 minutes. And it's pretty stiff. So I can press this down. Essentially, this is supposed to cut into the fondant, but I like to get a cleaner cut. So I just press down to make the impression and lift off, and then cut it out with my X-Acto knife. Then I am going to grab the background fondant. This was rolled out really thick, so this is about a 1/2 inch thick, I guess. And it has been sitting out again for like 20 minutes. So what I'm gonna do, and again, I have a video showing this in detail, and I will link that below. Get a little bit of water on the back, not too much. You don't want it to seep out because we're using the white as a border, and if it gets onto the white, then it's going to just make a mess. So just enough to make it stick, and place it down. And what you want to do, take your X-Acto knife. This is thick fondant, so I don't want to cut all the way down. I want to make a shallow cut. So I'm just going to do a little border, and I'm just sticking the tip of the X-Acto knife into the fondant, and I'm kind of sawing like this so I don't drag the fondant. And I just want to get a shallow cut so I can get an even border the whole way around. And then I will use this line as a guide to cut the whole thing out. Now that I have that line, I'm going to stick this straight up and down. Do not put it on an angle because the back is going to be thinner than the front and it won't be as stable. So stick it straight up and down and use that line as a guide and cut it out. And again, you could see these cuts are a little jagged. So what I like to do, flip it over, take your fingers around the edges and just smooth the edges out. And then do the same thing on the other side. And then you could take your Dresden tool. I'll link all the tools that I use below, and just get in. So what I'm doing is I'm pressing the fondant back down on itself. Press the fondant back down on itself and just smooth it out so the cuts look a lot neater. And there's your number 1. And now I have an 8-inch skewer here, and I just put this half under water to get it a little wet. And I want to stick the skewer in while the fondant is still soft, but it's holding its shape, so I'm not going to distort it. So what I want to do, get low so you can see that you want it sticking exactly in the middle. If it's too high or too low, it's going to poke out the top or the bottom. And what I'm doing, if you've seen any of my videos, I'm going to sound like a broken record. Twist and push. You're screwing it in here. You're not just jabbing it in because you're going to distort it. And I keep running my hand over the top to make sure I can't feel it poking up. Flip it over and then twist and push, twist and push, twist and push. So I'm just screwing it in here and make sure that it doesn't poke out the top. So I'm just kind of going like this and pushing to get it up in the middle. And there. So there's the topper. What I'm going to do is let it sit out like this for a couple hours before I go to bed. Flip it over. Let the air get exposed to the back side and then flip it over again, and then it'll be rock hard and I'll be able to put it on top of the cake. All right, so I let these sit out overnight, and what I did, I actually flipped them over. And I don't know why, but for some reason I find that the image may start to curl upward if I leave it face up. So when I cut them out, I leave it face up and make sure that the ink is dry, and then I flipped it over, and this also helps it excuse me, helps it dry harder because the air can hit the back side. So I just flip them all over. And just a note that this little Cocomelon logo, I'll put a split screen so you can see the cake. The Cocomelon logo is contoured to the shape of the cake. So since I'm putting it on a 6-inch cake, I have a 6-inch dummy here with some pins in the bottom so it won't roll around, and I just dried it on that so it could have its shape. The 3 characters that I want standing up on top are these 3. So I want to get a little skewer behind them, and I'm going to do that with some chocolate. When this goes into the cake, it's going to stand like this. So I need to make sure that the skewer comes straight down like this. All right. So I'm going to flip it over, and this is where I want it to be. So if you just turn this over and put the skewer on, you don't know how it's going to stick out, right? So you want to make sure, I try to make sure that it's completely covered, and it's going to stand up straight in the cake, and then hold it there and flip it over. I have melted candy melts here and a paintbrush, and I try to make this as clean as possible because you want it to look nice from the back as well. So I'm going to get a little bit of the chocolate on my paintbrush and just paint a long line, and then stick the skewer on top of it and press down, making sure that it's straight, and then get some more chocolate and completely cover the skewer with the chocolate and trying to keep it neat. So I'm just painting it on there. And I like to use the same color chocolate as the fondant, right? So if this was a black background, so if the fondant was black and I was using white chocolate, then it would really stick out. And again, this is on the back, so, you know, but you still want the back to look nice because people are going to see the back of the cake. And then I'll just do the same thing for the other 2. I use this really long skewer behind this guy because he was bigger and these 2 are smaller, so I can use the smaller ones. So again, holding it, making sure it's straight up and down, flip it over. This one's a little easier. And do the same thing. So now I'm just going to stick this in the refrigerator for about 10 minutes so the chocolate can solidify. All right, so here's my cake. It's just out of the refrigerator. What I want to do, now I left this in the fridge overnight because I was working on other cakes, but you know, after you put the ganache on, you really just need it to sit for, I don't know, I would let it be in there for like an hour or 2 so it can solidify. Yeah. And I like to just spin it around and see what drips I like the best and choose that as the front. I think I like this. But the front's going to be covered by the rainbow anyway, so it really doesn't matter. I'm just being a little OCD. So I have white buttercream icing in this bag with a tip number 12 on it, just a wide round tip. And I'm going to take my rainbow that's been sitting out and place it against the cake. So I want to get a little bit of icing behind here so it sticks to the cake, and I'm putting icing down where these little, where it touches the board. So I'm just making a mental note. Just going to put a little icing here just so I know where the clouds are going to go. Right? And lift it up. And then I'm just making some poofy clouds that I could stick the rainbow in. Getting a little bit of icing on the back and placing it down like so. So I'm not putting the back on the cake yet. I'm pushing this all the way down to the board, and then I'll press it against the cake. And now I can clean up these clouds a little bit, make them look a little more poofy. So I'm just squeezing a couple times, just filling in this area. One of my peeves is when there are points sticking out. You know, whenever you make little, Whenever you pipe dots, little points stick out just naturally from lifting the bag away. So I just wet a paintbrush and push in your points. I really could have dusted the cornstarch off the back of this stinking rainbow. Oh my gosh, why didn't I do that? It's all cornstarchy back here. Well, I'm making a mess now, but whatever. I'll clean it up later. Now I have the name that I want to put in here, and I just want to center it. So luckily this is 4 letters and these 2 are connected, so I'm going to put these 2 in the middle. You can adhere it with piping gel, with some melted chocolate. I'm actually just going to use a little bit of the icing on the back. Not too much because you don't want it to seep out, but I find that icing really helps it stick really well. If you put this on and you see that icing has started seeping out underneath, you could just take a small paintbrush, like I could see it in the middle of the A, and you could just wipe it away. When you take the time to look and clean up any little messes, it just makes your cake look so much cleaner. Okay, now next I'm going to put the Cocomelon logo right here, and you see how I dried it with the curve, so now it's going to fit on the side of the cake. If I dried it flat, which wouldn't be that big of a deal, it could just be flat, but it just looks better with a curve. So just getting a little bit of icing on the back, or piping gel, or chocolate, whatever you prefer. This is perfect, and this was a happy accident that he fits under there. I'm gonna put the dog in the middle. And again, icing on the back. I like to use icing to stick these to the cake because I refrigerate my cakes, and when I put this back in the refrigerator, the icing is going to solidify, so it's really going to hold everything on there really well. Doing the elephant on the left side. So I want him kind of standing like this, right? So he's not totally against the cake. He's kind of sticking out. You could just put him against the cake. It might be a little easier if you want, but I just want him kind of looking forward. So in order to do that, I just need icing sticking on this part of the ear to really get it to stick to the cake. Okay, you don't need too much because, especially because I refrigerate my cakes, like I said, the icing is going to solidify and it's really going to attach it to the cake. So putting a little icing behind the ear. Now, if I'm looking at this cake, I can kind of see the icing here. So just pushing it down with the paintbrush so you can't really see it. And then you could turn around and you can kind of clean up the extra icing behind it. I feel like if you do piping gel, yes, it would be clear, but it may not hold as good. And icing can really fill in that void, the voided area. All right, so can you see behind here? You can see the icing attaching it to the cake. If you really want to be a little OCD, you can dip your paintbrush in some water and smooth this out and just make it look a little neater. All right, then doing the same thing for the bear. Now I want to put the number 1 on top. I don't know why, but whenever I put a number down on a cake, I like to get a little piping gel on the bottom, and this will help prevent it from moving. And just finding the right spot. I want to do it a little off to the side. Okay, and now I have these out of the refrigerator. The chocolate has solidified, and I'm going to put these on. And now just I have the stars. And for the final touch, we want to put some ribbon around the board. I have 3 boards in this cake drum, and I want to use a, 3/8 inch ribbon. So I have this pink one. Just wrap it around. I have a video showing you how I make the cake drums, and I can link that below. Overlap it and hold my finger where I want to cut. I have these non-toxic glue sticks, and I like to flatten the foil against the side, so I just take the lid and press it against the side to flatten it out. So I'm just gonna put some around the outside. And I'm gonna have to do this off camera, but I'm gonna put glue around the whole one side of the ribbon. So now the side that is glued, I start in the back. It goes against the cake board. Hold it with one finger and stretch it around and press it down. Then I take my other finger and push it against the side. Hold it down and do the same thing. Stretch it around until you get to the back. Take your finger and press it against the cake board. Where it overlaps, just get a little glue and seal it. And then one more time for good measure, I just take my finger and press it the whole way around. And now just to clean everything up, being careful that this icing is still a little soft, I just want to wipe away any cornstarch that's still on these pieces. Should have done that before I put it on the cake, so make a note of that. And there is your adorable, simple little Cocomelon cake with the edible images. This is going to go back into the refrigerator until she picks it up tomorrow. So here you go. How adorable is this little cake? And simple-ish. So yeah, I'm going to link the videos, my in-depth tutorial on how to do the candy melt ganache drip, and also how to use edible images. But this is pretty simple and it ends up looking so adorable. So I hope you try it out. So I think that's it. If you guys have any questions or comments, leave them below. And you can follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and I have my website. I will link everything below as well. And if you want to stick around, you can watch these videos next and hit the subscribe button and the bell if you haven't already. Please like this video if you liked it and got something out of it. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, it's cake. Have fun. Don't be so serious. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.